So I'll just ask you, I'm just so curious as you've been following this for so long, and you're a registered nurse, right, Lynette?
Correct. Yeah.
And an artist.
Yes. I mean, I don't practice nursing anymore except for what I do for the Menopause Blog, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, nurse, writer, you've written a book, you've kept a blog for, okay, so the Menopause Goddess Blog is 16 years now?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, so where were you at when you started this blog? Where were you at personally? What drove you to do it?
So, as a nurse, I didn't know that much about menopause because they didn't teach us that much, quite honestly. We had like a 1,300 page textbook for women and child health, and there was about one sentence devoted to it, sort of saying that you stop your periods, and basically that's all it said. So I wasn't expecting much. I expected, maybe to be warm, a little bit warm once in a while. That was all. And when it hit like a ton of bricks with all these symptoms, I was talking to one of my best friends, and she was going through the same thing. I was like, is this normal? Is there something wrong with us? So we thought, well, let's find out. So we invited about a total of 15 women, counting us, to do a long weekend in Lake Tahoe, what we called a slumber party with a focus. And we met to see what are we going through, how is it different or the same for other women, what's happening to us. And unlike our mother's generation, we're not silent. We're like, hey, what is this? So we got together and we found out that we were not abnormal, that in fact, every woman that attended was having some symptoms, whether it was physical, emotional, mental, or some combination thereof. And we were just so excited to talk to one another and be able to commiserate and then start to work through, well, what do we do about this and where do we go from here?
Okay, so this was
and the blog.
The blog came from that. So at that time, I guess 16 years ago would be well after the study came out and there was the big scare about hormone therapy. What was it like around then when you were dealing with your symptoms? Was there a fear of hormone therapy?
Generally, there was a fear of hormone therapy just because of although when I talked to my physician, who was not only an MD, but also a homeopath and a naturopath, so he's kind of an odd duck in that. And he said, look, I've talked to some of the investigators of the Women's Health Initiative, and he said there's some design flaws and some ways that they looked at the data that left out a lot of things. And so, we talked it over, and I did decide to go on bioidentical hormones for a while because, just the symptoms were pretty much overwhelming. And, and then so recently they've come out with, you can certainly be on hormones for somewhere between 3 and 5 years with no increase in risk. And, they've now re-looked at the Women's Health Initiative. But yes, there was a lot of fear. And also, since we were in Lake Tahoe on the border of California, there was that feeling like you have, you've given in, you've given up if you take hormones.
Right.
Like you're supposed to do everything naturally.
Okay. Okay. So even when you took the bioidentical, you were like, I feel like that's interesting. I want to go back to the hormone therapy, but first I want to talk about bioidenticals because you took them. I think they were probably controversial then. Were they controversial then?
Yes and no. I mean, they were controversial in allopathic medicine.
Yeah.
But not controversial in naturopath, what we call integrative medicine practitioners, holistic. They used to call it holistic practitioners. Now we call it integrative. No, it was not controversial there at all.
Well, I think it's the same now, really. Like I think in that world, right. It's not controversial. It's just if you're looking at straight mainstream medicine, they're like bioidenticals are terrible. But that's interesting to hear the same thing. Okay, so what was it you were taking? What were you prescribed?
So I took progesterone cream.
Okay.
and that because it is true that you don't ever take unopposed estrogen. That's just like the law.
Yeah.
And I took some. At first, I had a estradiol patch, which, by the way, is actually bioidentical, even though your doctor may prescribe it, but they won't call it that. And then I moved on to a cream, a biased cream.
Okay.
And that was what I took for a long time, because topical things are a little less hinky than things that you take orally or
A little less
some
what?
other ways. I'd say less hinky, a little less side effecty, a little less scary, and then you can go all the way to having something implanted that pumps estrogen or progesterone to you, which I would not be my choice personally.
And did they help? Like, what did you find happened?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it completely helped. And I personally did not feel conflicted about it. It's just that becoming the menopause woman, I would have women say to me, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I caved. I took hormones." And I was like, never feel bad about that. Never feel bad about taking care of yourself or being healthy. That's just, so the societal influences can affect women as well. But I never had any problem with it. I felt completely comfortable. I felt like we'd done the research. I felt like, yeah, let's just do this.
And have you gone off of that now?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I still take progesterone cream sometimes. I still put it on, but I haven't had estrogen in a few years and haven't needed it. But it took a long time before that really worked its way through. I would say I was probably, I did less and less of it. Instead of doing estrogen every day, it went down to every other day and then once a week. And, just to kind of keep things at a sort of even keel.
Did you have any resurgence of symptoms?
Yeah. I mean, when I wouldn't say resurgence, but I still continued to have symptoms. I mean, I've met women in their 70s, and I hate to say this, who say they still get hot flashes every day. And so, that's a little disheartening. But I can say with all the women I've talked to, it never is as bad as it is in the first year or two. The first year or two can be really, really rough, but we will get through this, and it is mostly normal.
Yeah, mostly normal. What's interesting about bioidenticals to me is I'm learning about all this. Bioidentical, have you heard the term body identical?
Yes.
So that is bioidentical. Like,
Correct.
That's the joke of allopathic medicine, would just like bioidentical is like this crazy thing, but it's actually the hormones that they prescribe just called body identical. That's hysterical to me. That's like, I just find that so strange that exists. And if you say bioidentical, like, I just find that crazy.
Well,
2021.
I will say it did get a bad rap when celebrities, who shall remain nameless, made a big splash, sort of pushing that. And you're like, no, you don't really get your medical advice from a celebrity.
Right.
Sorry to say. And that I think was a backlash. There was a backlash from allopathy going, oh, no, you don't, instead of understanding that there really were benefits. And I think most women are pretty good at these days at educating themselves and asking good questions. But I will say that, and there are menopause practitioners now, with the North American Menopause Society and such. And I've met a few that are really terrific. But there's still a real lack of knowledge and understanding with OBGYNs generally.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think they're also controversial because progesterone cream, that seems to be really controversial these days. And I'm trying to decipher why. I think one reason is that you can't use progesterone cream to oppose estrogen. Like, it doesn't work. You have to take progesterone. If you're going to have estrogen therapy, you can't just use the progesterone cream, right? Am I
that is not my understanding. Now, you don't want to take wild yam cream. There is a difference. Okay. Wild yam cream is like a precursor to progesterone. And so that's not, but if you take USP or however it is in whatever country, progesterone cream, you are actually taking progesterone.
Okay.
You do not have to take it in a pill. So that is the actual real deal.
This is what, no wonder women are so confused, because there are doctors, on social media saying progesterone cream, you can't touch it. It's a bad thing. And it's like, what are you talking about? Because it seems like a nice way to sort of get into it,
It's been around since the 70s. There was a physician, John Lee, who first started using progesterone cream way back in the day. And so it's been around forever. One of our goddesses, one of our original meeting people, was at the time CEO and owner of Emerita, which is a natural products for women company. So she could quote you chapter and verse of every research study, everything that had been done. And, she eventually sold the company, and it's owned by another company now. And so the more I looked into it, the more I was like, oh, come on. No, so if it is real progesterone, not wild yam cream, not a phytoestrogen cream, but the actual progesterone, the same stuff that you would stick in your mouth, just putting it on your skin, that opposes estrogen.
There's doctors saying it's not, yelling about it on Twitter. But there's a lot of people yelling.
I was just going to say, we've got every nutball on the universe on social media. So you really have to let the buyer beware, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering, I think also the controversy is pharmaceuticals versus compounding pharmacies. And then you get the allopathic medicine acting like compounding pharmacies, not regulated, and this is regulated, and compounding pharmacies. And it's a funny conversation for me to watch, because compounding pharmacies are run by pharmacists who have tons of training, right? And they're, and it's not like some meth lab, like some Walter White. That's what they make it.
Right. Yes. Yeah, you're right. Now I will say this. I mean, they aren't regulated the same way. So again, we're back to let the buyer beware. You should trust your compounding pharmacy. You should, feel comfortable with them. Again, it's a drag that at this time of life, when you're so unable to even make a brain cell work, that you have to educate. So I really profoundly wish women would educate themselves before menopause, so that it doesn't, hit you upside the head like it did me. But you're right, compounding pharmacies are actual pharmacies, and I have not had any problem. And if you have a integrative medicine practitioner you trust, they will have a pharmacy that they trust, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I speaking as this is blasphemous, I'm sure, but speaking as a nurse who has straddled both areas of integrative practice and allopathic practice, a lot of medicine is like a religion. Like if you're taught something, then that becomes like gospel, and you will hold on to that for as long as you possibly can, even if there's actual evidence to the contrary. And I've seen it over and over again. And so when it becomes a religion, it just becomes solidified, instead of, it used to be, you can't reverse heart disease. It's absolutely not possible. And then Dean Ornish came along and he reversed heart disease. So you're like, oh, well, okay, I get, but the amount of time it took that to catch up was astronomical. It was ridiculous. So it's, and not to harshing on medical professionals. We do the best we can. We've been taught a lot of stuff. And if it weren't for all that stuff and us remembering that, we probably couldn't do the job we do. That said, opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy. So, I don't mean that you have to be codependent and take care of your doctor. I mean, you have to find a practitioner that you can trust, and that you can actually be a partner in your own healthcare with.
Okay. And just one last thing on hormone therapy. Another thing that's been pointed out to me is that the allopathic medicine very much focused on estrogen and then progesterone because you need it, and then maybe it will do some things. Whereas the integrative naturopathic world is, and I don't know, I'm sure you know Dr. Jerry Lynn Pryor is leading, like from the University of British Columbia, she's an endocrinologist, Progesterone. Why not look at progesterone alone? Why not maybe progesterone is all you need? Maybe start with that. It's not, you don't have to taper off of it, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
That's an interesting, was that around too when you were starting out?
Yeah, I started with just progesterone in the beginning.
Was that divide? Was that divide on estrogen and progesterone there then?
Boy, it's hard to know because there was so much less out there about all this. That's one of the reasons why we put together our group. There were maybe 2 websites that I knew of, 2. One of them was a woman called, My Menopause Blog. And it was really quite terrific because she would just document her journey. And then the other one was one called powersurge.com, which but was so busy I couldn't look at it. Yep. They had experts and this and that and video running, and I was like, oh no, I'm already overstimulated, but it was good to know they were there. And then anything else was just see your doctor, get hormones or don't get hormones. There was nothing available. So even that controversy wasn't out there. But the integrative practitioners, a lot of them did start, like my doctor did, with progesterone. And progesterone helped some of the symptoms for me. But by itself was just not enough. So I ended up, and I took the estrogen, not for symptoms actually, even though I was having dreadful hot flashes. But because I think one of the things that we don't recognize still is that around the time of menopause, immune system takes a huge hit. And you see women who eat healthy, run, exercise, do everything, and they'll get hit with some big thing like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or some big event. And it's like, why? And I just think menopause screws with everything. And so I had one of those big events. I had a cardiac virus, which you might say, oh, that's just coincidental, except I'd worked in coronary care most of my life, been exposed to those exact viruses. Nothing ever happened. And then I took a trip to Tahiti, caught a cardiac virus, and I got 90% well, and I wasn't back yet. So I went to my doctor and I said, I have this feeling that, I need to shore myself up a little bit. And he said, absolutely, we'll add estrogen. And in a month I was fine.
Wow. That's really interesting. I always find I have a low grade sore throat. That's something I've noticed, that I always have like a little bit of a sore throat. And it's, when you're young, you're like, oh, I've got a bit of a sore throat. I better go to bed early tonight and drink some ginger tea and I'll be fine in the morning. And then, so I was doing that all the time. And then it's like, oh, I still have it. Yeah. Then I Googled, of course it can be, it makes perfect sense. Right. I have not ever thought about it for that. That's really helpful. What about you? Okay, what's your saying? Menopause will set you free, but first it will really piss you off. There's so many women, there's so many women struggling now. And tell us about the set you free part.
So once you get past the initial horror of the, symptoms, everything, brain fog, the physical stuff, the inability to think, the emotional maelstrom, whichever set of symptoms afflicts you. Once you start getting past that, you'll notice that a lot of times there's an empty nest syndrome, a bunch of stuff that happens around that time, but you're still fertile in a way. And so the impulse and the urge for creativity starts to rise. And most women I know find that they go, oh, I've always wanted to write, paint, garden. I've always wanted the time, so that the focus becomes on fertility in a different way.
I love it.
And so that you actually become what you always wanted to be. It sounds like too good to be true, but I can tell you that every one of the original 15 of us did indeed go through that and are still going through it and are really happy. I have one more thing. I think we all think the most important remedy we had of all the remedies was each other.
Okay.
That group that it was like synergy. Having all of us together meant we moved through things faster and more beautifully than we would have done alone.
Yeah, because when you're going through it alone, it's in your mind, and you literally are thinking, like, if there's just one you're thinking of a symptom, and you're like always thinking it's serious, like there's something seriously wrong with
Yeah.
me possibly right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And what is wrong with, and you're always beating the emotional. Did you find the emotional mental health sort of like, I just find that I blame myself for them, or I'm just like always looking for reasons why I'm feeling down today, and like, didn't I eat right yesterday, and didn't I this or that? And my biggest thing is like, this just is it, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a woman thing that we always look for. What did I do?
Right.
Definitely. And I think we get past that during in menopause. It's like, menopause is under the shit happens category of life. And the thing is, you can do everything right, and it still might hit you like a speeding freight train. And, I didn't have any of the emotional symptoms except anxiety. That was my emotional symptom, where I just like worry for no reason, like out of nowhere. And that's weird and normal. And so finding out how to, laugh at yourself and deal with that, even while it's still going on. But some of the girls in our group had some real serious emotional effects, like one of them would just call me up and cry on the phone, and a lot of stuff gets worked through during the menopause transition, stuff that hasn't been paid attention to, essentially. Yeah, I think knowing A, that it's normal, and B, that it doesn't last forever is huge, because once we can get a handle on that, women have babies, women can handle a lot if we know it's normal and it doesn't last forever. Help us, let us know that, and then we go, okay, we got this. It's going to be ugly for a little while.
Now they are actually now saying, you talked about there's some stuff gets worked out, right? Like, this is a time when stuff comes up, and they're now saying, like, actual, I think they call them adverse childhood experiences, whatever you want to call it, trauma, whatever. Is that what you're referring to? Whatever stuff you brought, you stuffed down. How did you work through that? How did you face up to that stuff?
Well, thankfully, I had faced up to most of my childhood stuff before that, so lucky me. But and knowing that, I was able to be there for some of the friends and just say, like the woman who cried on the phone for like, I was like, look, this is all the crying you didn't do as a kid, and you're just healing it now. So go ahead and cry, just like, and she says now, years later, she said that was so unbelievably helpful, because it really was. She's a go-getter. She's a real energetic, successful, interesting, amazing woman, and always was, never stopping to feel that hurt or whatever it was. And so when she did feel it, it was pretty overwhelming. It's like all the filters and all the barricades come down. And so during that, and that seems awful, but it's a really good thing. And and here's where I think the group of women can help one another, because we did some compassionate truth telling to one another, in that if somebody was thinking of doing something, a little bit over the top, I always say to women, don't make any big decisions during the first year or two, because you wouldn't want a person who's going through puberty to make life-changing decisions. They're not capable. And this is puberty to the 10th power. So, if you're thinking, it's normal as people to go, I feel horrible. What in my environment is causing this? My husband probably, or my job, or where I live. And you're like, no, it's really an upheaval that's happening internally. Believe me, if those other things really need to be changed, they'll still be there in a year or two. And then you'll know that, oh yeah, that was real. Okay, jettison. But making those big decisions right from the get-go, we're just not in a space to do that.
That is very, very, very good advice. Did you have a partner going through this? And how did that work? If so, were they supportive?
Yeah. So I've married, and so it was my husband. And it's a little shocking to someone's partner when, let's say, libido leaves, like takes an extended vacation, and when everything is just like, if you get touched, you're like, oh, don't touch me. It makes me hot. So everything has changed. I think what was lucky for us is that having the group so early on in the process, and them writing the book, I would read the book, as would the other members of the group. We would read it to our husbands or our spouses or our partners. And reading that, they go, oh, so it's not just you and me. It's like all women and all men are kind of tackling this right now. So how can we help support you through this journey? Otherwise, if you just stay in your own little bubble, I now have couples that say they read the blog together. That they just sit there and read. So they really, that's when you get an understanding that this is not a personal thing, like, oh, I don't like you anymore, or I'm changing. I am changing, but not in a way that is going to be detrimental necessarily to our partnership.
Yeah.
So how can we work this out together? And I think that's huge. And I still tell women, if they say, oh, my husband doesn't understand, I go, just read him the blog or read him the book.
Yeah.
Because once you know that it's everybody, it's not just the two of you, then you go, oh, okay, well, let's see what we can do about this, especially men, because they like to fix and help.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that definitely works. And I've had friends who were gay women in partnership, and they go, you think things are tough? You ought to be two women going through menopause at the same time. Yes. That's when they are tough. So really calling on extra levels of understanding.
I'm curious, this is a little off topic, but did you ever notice any hormonal changes in your husband?
Yeah, he actually had a full-on hot flash one day, which he was like, oh my God, this is hideous. Wow. I don't know how you guys survived this. But no, men's hormones definitely go down so slowly over time that is not huge. But I do notice things. There's an interesting thing that seems to happen. We all notice this in our women's group, is that men start becoming, I think, they start adopting more feminine attributes, and women start adapting a few more male attributes. That is, suddenly we're now free from child rearing and a whole bunch of other things, and that creativity urge comes up. And so we're doing things, we're putting things out in the world, and whereas our spouse, if he's male, is sort of going, oh, can we just like hang out together? Let's just snuggle and watch a movie, or so you see some of that happening, and it's really disconcerting at first. We were I'll give you a little anecdote here. We were at a restaurant, my girlfriend that started the group with me and we were at a restaurant, and there were a couple of women talking next to us, and they were they talking first, or were we? Oh, I guess we were. And I was like, oh my gosh, have you noticed that your husband is getting more like he wants to hang out with you more and just be with you? And she's like, oh yeah. The other day he said, where are you going? And I said, the store. And he goes, can I come with you? And she's like, what? So she said, yeah, I'm totally noticing that. And these women
with you.
These women at the next table were older than we were. They were probably late 60s. And they said, girls, we couldn't help but listen to what you were saying. And they go, it gets worse or better, depending on your mindset. One woman said, my husband's a high-powered CEO, and he finally retired. And she goes, he wants to do everything with me. He wanted to come to lunch today. And I'm like, no, this is my time with my girlfriend. And she goes, and you don't want to like shut him down, because I love him and I want to hang out with him, but not like all the time. And so we were laughing. And then in the middle of it, a phone rang. And they go, that's one of the husbands. Whose phone is that? Yeah, it's mine. and they're cracking up while I'm saying, yeah, no, lunch is great. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. Yeah. But we probably won't be back for another hour or two. Yeah, I think we're going to do some shopping after. And these women are falling out of their chairs. I mean, so that's the longer answer to a
I like that.
question, but
Yeah. I like that answer. You know, I feel like it just feels like so much of what we've been told and we have believed is a lie. Like
yeah.
that, you know, it's like when I talk to women like you, it sounds like something I want, a place I want to be. That
Mhm.
what you've just told me doesn't sound at all like the, you know, fear-based narrative that your husband's going to get rid of you when you stop being and go out with a younger woman. Like, I know these things happen, but it just seems
Yeah, but
more and more that they're like a story that we were told or we made up, or maybe a combo. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think recently I was reading about something else, but I think it applies here in that we need to restory ourselves. We need to really be, and my husband's really good at like, one of the things he's been talking about lately is he's really watching like some of the political stuff and everything. He goes, oh, that's another story we're telling ourselves. You know, beware. That's like demonizing another side. It's a story. It's not real.
Yeah.
And so him saying that, but sort of, and then hearing this woman writer saying we need to restory ourselves. I think you're exactly right. You know, because it's always somebody amorphous out there. You know, certainly there are men who have left their wives for younger women. It is not the rule. It's you know, it's unusual. By the same token, I would say, if you're going through menopause and you're feeling that lack of libido and that lack of closeness, really be understanding of your spouse too. Like, you're not the only one going through this, so is your spouse. So make sure that this person knows that it's not a rejection, and that you do care and you do want to be close, and talking it through is the most important thing. And one of our goddesses, she was most distressed by the lack of libido, going from to zero, and her husband didn't know what to do, and they went to couples therapy, and they had a great therapist who said, look, take the pressure off. Once a week, show up together naked with a smile on your face. You don't have to do anything. Just hang out, whatever. Maybe you'll just hold hands. And they did that. So the closeness was reestablished. And then after 2 years, she burst into the door of our meeting and said, girls, my libido is back.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I just saw a video on TikTok. There's this woman in Australia I love, Bridget Polly, and she did the same thing. She said, a therapist must have told her, but she said, because it's that horrible feeling when you don't want to have sex and you know someone wants to. It's so, because you're like, I gotta like pretend I'm busy. It's just a whole thing. It's the worst part.
Yeah, it is. And that's the one that most needs to be talked about.
Yeah,
most definitely. And that's why I'd say read, you know, put libido in the search box on the blog and read those together.
Yeah.
Because that lets people know, yeah, it's a normal thing. It's a transition. It's not a permanent thing. It's just, there's going to be some bumpiness for a while. Yeah. And if you have a good relationship and you care about each other, you will totally get through this and actually be closer.
Yeah. I mean, it's true though, that some of marriages, when they get to this point, they've had cracks and things that haven't been addressed for a long time. So this adds to the whole thing, right? Like when you.
Oh, right. Yeah, it does. And that's true. So in our group, we had one breakup and one divorce and one new marriage. And then everybody else, same partners, no change. And, you know, so that would probably be just representative of any group when you think about it. So we were smart enough not to make any changes when things were at their worst.
Hang on. Okay. I just have a couple more questions for you. One is there's a lot of messaging now about the sort of links between this time in our lives and the big three: cardiovascular disease, dementia, and osteoporosis. And to listen, it's sort of like, you better be on hormone therapy if you're not, because, you know, to sort of like protect yourself from these things. I just heard a radio interview the other day where the woman said, clearly you need to be, but I've interviewed probably I ask doctors this all the time because I haven't gone on hormone therapy yet. I want to, I just sort of have a problem with doctors. And I've never got a clear answer, but doctors say no. They're like, mostly lifestyle is the biggest factor for all three of those. If you are, make sure to have a healthy diet, you move, manage your stress. That is the number one thing you can do. What do you think about that? You're a nurse. What do you think about?
Yeah, I agree. The jury's still out as to whether exogenous hormones make any difference to the rest of that later in life. So I would be sort of saying, no, it is the lifestyle thing. And so it's moving and it's eating well. But when I say eating well, I also say don't harsh on yourself if pig out on some margaritas and cake, that's good for your mental health. You don't want to do that every day or even maybe every week, but you do want to do that. You want to, be a little freer and gentler and kinder with yourself in all aspects. And in terms of osteoporosis, really, it is really important to lift weights, and they can be tiny weights. That's the thing. You don't have to. In fact, I would recommend that they be tiny unless, you get as much by slow lifting of tiny weights as you ever would from big weights. And weight bearing exercise. So walking is like the most amazing exercise you can do for cardiovascular health, for balance, for everything. And I just posted a blog about the Harvard Health newsletter just came out with, they've actually studied how many steps you need. So we were all thinking 10,000 steps, which is, oh my God, a lot of steps and takes a lot of time. And so the reason of 10,000 steps they found out was in the 70s, this Japanese pedometer maker put out their pedometer, and the name meant 10,000 steps. But there's never been any study to say that 10,000 steps is necessary or even good. So at 4,400 steps, you have a dramatic decrease in any cardiovascular events. Up to 7,500, you get more benefit, but over 7,500, you're not getting any more benefit.
Okay, so don't kill yourself.
So I would say aim for that 4,400. That's not hard to do at all, and then you're not overwhelmed where you go, I can't do it, so I'm not going to do anything, which happens.
Yes.
So eat well, move, and have a good relationship with yourself primarily. Before you even think of somebody else. This is the relationship we found out we really need to work on more than any other relationship. It's like, now we have to get to know ourselves and get to know our new selves and become who do we want to be? It's the second half of life here.
Yeah. I feel like so much of this I feel like we're really being called, I almost call it like a hero or a heroine's journey, because we're being called to say, like, who are you? Who do you want to be? How will you take care of yourself to get those? Because you can get till this point in life without answering those questions. But I think if you don't, it's gonna be really hard. Just the Japanese pedometer thing. I swear 8 glasses of water a day came from the plastic bottled water manufacturers. If I had someone who would fund me to do an investigation on that, I'm sure of it. It was around the same time. Now I'm grateful to them because I've proceeded to drink copious amounts of water ever since that came out. But it's just, I think a lot of these things we're told were just marketing strategies.
Oh, absolutely. And we just took it as gospel. And why? And here's another thing that I will say. It's really good to know our own bodies, and not to take any of that as gospel, but to go, oh, my body does best exercising in the afternoon, and I don't need to exercise that much, and I need to alternate days of doing things and being really gentle and kind with ourselves. And that's like a positive feedback loop. As we start doing that, then we do more and more healthy things because we really can't help it. And that feels right. And there's all these new things out now. I don't know how new they really are. They're not that new, but they seem to be catching on, about intuitive eating. And, instead of a diet or a thing that you do or whatever, which I felt like that for a long time, that your body will tell you, and sometimes you need a pig out and then you're done. And sometimes but you feel like, instead of anything being regimented, just like eat when you're hungry, eat what your body really seems to want, make yourself happy, and then it's a lot easier to eat what's best for you. You know, if you're doing creative stuff and you're enjoying life and then the eating thing. And I admit, with COVID, a lot of us, you know, our eating maybe wasn't the greatest because we weren't feeling really great about things. But as we start to, there's glimmers of hope now. And as we start to open up more, then we go, oh, all right, well, we can drop this extra 10 and it won't be a big deal, but I'm not going to obsess about it either. I actually do not weigh myself anymore.
Oh, wow. When did you stop?
I found I stopped a couple years ago because I realized I can tell what my weight is by my clothes. Because I don't get rid of my clothes. So it's pretty clear to me when they start to get tight or when they're hanging on me. So I was like, the only thing that happens when I weigh myself is I start obsessing. I am obsessed, you know, like, oh, that was 0.2 of a pound more. And I mean, it's silly. If you don't do that, good on you. But I do.
Oh, I
And
do.
so I went, this is not healthy. And so, you know, my husband jokes about it all the time. He goes, I know you don't weigh yourself. And I was like, nope, I really don't. And I can tell, you know, when there's a few extra, I can tell, and I up the exercise, or, you know, and everything goes back to a certain normal. And I don't obsess about, I have to look like, you know, an anorexic teenager. You know, I think our body image stuff is just so crazy. And I talked to a OBGYN one time. I interviewed him and I just loved him. I can't even remember what his thing was, you know, but we got off on the topic of women and weight gain. And he said, I feel so badly because all these years I kept telling women, well, calories in, calories out, and you need to lose weight, and da da da. He said, oh dear God, my wife went through menopause. And he said, she's the healthiest woman I know. And she put on weight and it wouldn't come off. And he said, so I have a theory that women's bodies were adapted for this. Like in the days when the elder women were the last ones to be fed. And so their bodies had to hang on to calories because they were in the tribes, the least productive. Even though their wisdom was referred, they didn't do things. They didn't make babies. They didn't do a lot of the chores. They weren't hunting. And so their bodies adapted to, he said, I think it's a throwback to Paleolithic times. And it's nobody's fault. Yeah. And this was his, and he said, I am so much more compassionate with women now when they come to my practice and they're menopausal. I go, oh yeah, I know it's tough. You know, he said, and most of the time I say, do what you can, but don't obsess about it.
It is nice to see that calories in, calories out be recede into the, you know, I know the basic science of it, the basic energy physiology of it, but it doesn't apply to us at this time. It just doesn't. It's just the other things are going on. And I run a health and wellness website in Abu Dhabi, and I've made it like a habit when I talk to these trainers, you know, like these buff, like 30-year-old, I always ask them, like, you know, what do you think about women my age? And they'll always be like really smugly, like, at the end of the day, it's calories in, calories out. And I'm like, no, it's not.
It's really not. Oh. It's not calories in. It's not a special diet, and everybody's body is different, and our body changes. So, you know, when I was a cardiac nurse, I was vegetarian until, and then after a while, that diet didn't work at all. And again, it's back to getting to know your own body and to be cognizant of when it changes and when it needs something different, and it will tell you. It will make it clear, you know, whether you need probiotics and need to eat more yogurt or kefir, or whether you need, it will let you know if you pay attention. And that's the big thing, is turning our attention inward instead of outward. That's a big piece of this.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, I'll just wrap up by asking you, so you were like the original social media. You took to blogs early, but what do you think of all the social media and all the explosion in attention to this area recently?
So I think that it's a new problem now, unfortunately, The problem when I started was there wasn't hardly any information. Now the problem is there's a glut of data and information, but how do you sift through that and how do you find out what's relevant? And it's, so that's hard. And I really feel for women trying to navigate through all the stuff that's out there now, and how do you know what's right? And so it's tough. It is tough. And then I have to fall back on two things, and I can't stress this first one enough. You must have a group of women that you talk about this with, that you meet with, that I cannot stress enough how important that is. You don't think it's that important, but it's the number one thing. And also getting to know your own body. And it's a bummer if we haven't gotten to know it before now. But again, that's another part of this turning inward. So it's only going to help you. And so to really pay attention to yourself, really pay attention to your own body. And, you know, for me, and recognizing what works best for you. Like for me, if I exercise, it needs to be solitary. I don't do well with the exercise and yammer thing. Some women can do their best exercising if they do it as a social activity. Again, you're finding out who you are, what works for you, and honoring that. And I think that's huge. And I'm sorry there's so much information now. I'm not totally sorry, because it's better than when there was none. But I really get how tough it can be to sort through things. It's a lot of work, but
I think there might be more yelling now. I think there might be more like, you know, you're doing this or that's bad or this is, I don't know. I can't tell. It's always, I've been here the whole time, but it seems a little.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. And, you know, I think one of the, if I were just philosophically saying, one of the biggest problems, not just with the menopause, what you should do, but with so many things, is being right. I think if we stop being right, we leave an opening for other information and wisdom to get in. And I think, you know, being right is really screwing with us at this point in time.
Across the board, but in this too.
Across the board.
I can't thank you enough. All the way from Hawaii. You're like the original. And Menopause Goddess. You still blogging. You're still, even though you're past this, you can't stop being interested in it.
I can't, and I mostly can't because of the letters I get. You know, I thought a few years ago, I thought I had a plan to sort of pull back from it. I had gotten 2 other women involved. I was almost 60 then. One woman was 50 and one was 70. And it was so cool because the other 2 women were menopause coaches. So I was like, oh, this is great. We'll get them on board, and one or both of them will take over, and I'll take more of a back seat and just talk about the second half of life. And life got in the way. The 70-year-old, her husband had a big heart attack and she had to retire completely. The 50-year-old took a full-time job in a holistic health thing and had no time left. And I get that. And I think that, so you kind of watch, all right, what's the universe saying? And then I get these letters going, oh my God, I'm so glad I found the blog and I don't know what I'd do without it. And I go, all right. So I guess I'm in it for the long haul. I mean, you know, I can't bail. So even though menopause is mostly in my rearview mirror these days. Yeah.
Well, you reached out to me when I started my newsletter, and it was the sweetest thing. And I really, really, really appreciated it. You're one of the first people that did that. And the way you look at it is just makes me feel so, I don't know how to describe it. It's just really beautiful to talk to someone who's been through it, and to someone who's so reasonable and who straddles both worlds. You know, you're in, like, it's more common nowadays, but it's very reasonable. So I appreciate it. We need you still talking about it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, it was a delight. Thank you.